progression it's evolved,
I
right? So I would love for you to just
Yeah.
touch on it, how you
Yeah.
approach your lifts and how you look at progression from a session to session, week to week, however.
Yeah, I'm a realist. Like, obviously in the gym for 36 years, it's not like all of a sudden I'm gonna start packing on a bunch of muscle. Like, okay, there's nothing I can do differently that's like, okay, in a year's time I have 5 pounds more muscle. Like, I'm a realist. Father time catches up, rate of progression slows down. But it doesn't mean like I'm not training as if I'm trying to put on some more size. Of course, I got to be smart though. It's more, you have to use more strategy, which I've kind of talked about already. But yeah, I mean, my body's gonna tell me what I can and can't do. And I just have to make sure I'm listening to it, because sometimes the ego can still get in the way. Even though we're older, you still want to get after it and kill it. You still want to move more weight, but sometimes my ego will say, all right, Jeff, let's squat. Let's get back into squatting, and I did that like a month ago. I did 2 sessions, and after the second session, my lower back was hurting for 3 days. And I'm like, okay, yeah, this is not conducive. Let's be smart about this. Let's use other exercises outside of the squat to get a stimulus. And I don't put as much stock into my numbers as I once did. Like, I'll use the logbook as a guide, like as far as guiding my efforts, but I don't get married to the numbers, meaning like I don't get all upset if I miss a target or I don't beat the logbook. If I beat it, great, awesome, right? But as long as like I have the intent and the effort towards beating it, that's what's most important. Because from a principle standpoint, if I'm doing that, I'm going to be at the appropriate proximity to failure, meaning I'm going to be training hard enough to get a stimulus. And your muscle doesn't know. Your muscle don't know if you're lifting 200 pounds or 210. If it feels like, I can make 200 pounds feel like 210, so I don't get too entwined with the numbers. I'm more focused on the effort more than anything. But I will say, you do want those numbers to move over time. Like, you don't want to get stagnant either. And you're just like, well, I'm going to just lift 100 pounds for the next 5 years. Like, chances are your physique's probably going to look like you've been lifting 100 pounds for 5 years. Well, if it turns into 105 or 110, that's better than 100, even if it is slow. Chances are you might see a result from that. But if you're 100 pounds for 5 years, or you're like, now you're went from 100 to 90 because you're quote unquote trying to feel the muscle, meaning you're now all of a sudden you're like doing some things like slowing your rep speeds way down and things like that, where you're limiting how much recruitment you're going to get. Like, you don't want to get into that mindset as well. So as far as progressions, I kind of just look at the exercise in question, right? Like, okay, if it's a lateral, like obviously my focus isn't going to be on loads, because it's not an exercise that's conducive towards loads. So I'm like, okay, I got reps. Maybe got extra sets I can throw in there, because that's not going to wipe me out too much, because it's just a small little movement. Or it's like, hey, let me pause these reps, so I can get more out of less, in a sense. Like, there's different avenues to get progress on certain lifts, and you kind of have to think about, okay, what am I capable of doing? What makes the most sense? What's practical here? Like, when I was healthier, like as far as like younger and my body is more resilient, like a squat, like, okay, I can probably move loads for a while on that. Every week I could probably jump 5-10 pounds, but inevitably it's going to slow. It's going to get to a point where you're just like, oh shit, yeah, it's getting too heavy now. So how do I keep progressing this lift? Well, if you add sets, I mean, that's going to probably run your fatigue up pretty quickly. And maybe it's a set, but maybe more than that, you're like, okay, that might be overwhelming. So maybe it's just like, okay, let me just see if I can increase reps now. So I'm working with the same load, but now let's see if I can just maybe add a few more reps to it. Another way would be like, hey, let me just go away from squats and do some other exercises that cover the same musculature, but aren't as taxing. I just give myself a little break from that lift, and then maybe I revisit it in 6 months' time. And, let's see if I can actually build it up 10 or 15, 20 pounds, 30 pounds heavier than it was the last time I was doing it. So it just depends, it depends on context too. I mean, we could talk about like deficits, surpluses. It kind of just depends what that environment is at the moment. What makes the most sense as far as how you're able to progress a lift. That's it. We don't have to worry about going to failure. It's not about muscle development in my mind. It's more like developing skill. The muscle will come in time. The intensity will come in time as you advance. So it's okay, once you have form, technique down, and you're confident in that, then it's like, okay, now